Hello and good day to you. My name is Justin Pollard. Today is November 6th, 2025, and I'm currently here in Fiji as part of my ongoing research on breadfruit. The research that I'm doing now is independent, but I hope to apply to sustainable agriculture or sustainability policy graduate programs in the near future. And this video is to provide first-hand documentation of my first-hand impressions of the actual fruit itself, breadfruit. Unfortunately, in Taiwan right now, this type of breadfruit, Artocarpus altilis, the domesticated Polynesian breadfruit, is currently not available. It is allowed as an import product, but it is not currently being grown anywhere in Taiwan. But I believe that should change. And that is why I came to Fiji, so that I could gain firsthand knowledge of the way the fruit is grown, the cultural uses and culinary uses here in Fiji, as well as the practical details of how it's being cultivated here, what limitations there might be, and what possibility there is for future export, commercialization, and to learn more about the potential for shipping in vitro germplasm of breadfruit from Fiji to Taiwan for future agricultural cultivation. So I have had meetings already with CPACT and professors from Fiji National University, and I've had really wonderful, productive conversations with them that make me feel very optimistic about this project. But for the purposes of this video, I won't go into detail about that. I would just like to simply talk a little bit about some of the connections between breadfruit and Taiwan. So when Taiwan was first settled from mainland China around 4,000 years ago, those first communities that came to the island had the beginnings of boat building technology that allowed them to get to Taiwan. And over the centuries, while they were on the island of Taiwan and their cultures were developing, their technologies were developing, they became superior naval explorers. And over the preceding thousands of years, they spread from Taiwan to the Philippines, what is now Indonesia, and across both the Indian Ocean toward Madagascar and throughout the entire Pacific, from Hawaii and Easter Island to New Zealand. And the way we can have some documented proof of this is if we look at their languages. All of their languages are a part of the Austronesian language family, and the roots of that language are in the indigenous languages of Taiwan. And now, as I'm here in Fiji, I've shared with many Fijian people that something as simple as counting from 1 to 10 in a traditional indigenous Taiwanese language, such as the Amis language, it shares 5 of the 10 numbers with Fijian, even though Fiji and Taiwan culturally, that connection through the diaspora is, even though it is about 3,000 years separated in time, they still share 5 of the same numbers. The pronunciation is almost identical. And there are many other cultural similarities as well. In addition to that, genetic research shows that not only Fijians, but the majority of the populations throughout the islands of the Pacific, the majority of those indigenous populations have a very high percentage, 50 to 60%, East Asian DNA tracing back to the region of Taiwan, right? And that's really quite impressive. So there is this deep cultural connection that Taiwan has as an ancestor to all of these cultures that have sprung up over time as those ancestors of the modern indigenous people spread throughout Southeast Asia and into the Pacific. And there were certain crops that are known as canoe crops that were taken with them as they spread. And those crops were taken with them because they had a very readily, they were easily able to be kept in the boats and taken to islands and then grown there. So those crops are things like coconuts, taro, sweet potatoes, and breadfruit. And initially, the Taiwanese variety of breadfruit, which is Artocarpus trichulianus, and there are some examples of Artocarpus altilis in Taiwan, but very, very few. The majority of the Artocarpus altilis came from the area of Borneo and were spread by those Austronesian ancestors both into that region and slightly into Taiwan, but as well into the Pacific. And those early varieties of breadfruit, such as Trichulianus or Marianensis, and the early forms of altilis, are seeded varieties. And the eating texture of the early varieties, I am guessing, were more similar to the Taiwanese Artocarpus trichulianus, which has a delicious sweet potato-like flavor, but unfortunately is not very viable as an agricultural product because it has many seeds and it's also quite fibrous. So it's not that easy to eat. Despite that, it still has deep cultural significance among the indigenous peoples of Taiwan. But their ancestors, as they spread through the Pacific, they, like farmers all over the world, slowly, selectively bred the breadfruits so that they could maximize the positive qualities and minimize the negative qualities. And what resulted is the modern domesticated breadfruit, this is a boiled version. This is not fresh, so that's why it has the brown color. But the modern domesticated breadfruit varieties are seedless, and they also completely lack any fibrous texture. But they're also nutritional powerhouses. Surprisingly, as a tree crop, they are culinarily and nutritionally most similar to root crops. So when you eat breadfruit, it's very similar to eating taro, or potatoes. It has the texture and the very, very mild flavor of a root crop. And I will be showing more about the texture and flavor in a little bit as I prepare this breadfruit. But I came to Fiji for very much so that I could provide this documentation to show all of you the reality of this fruit. From a sustainability perspective, tree crops are far more sustainable than any other field or soil-based crops, such as tubers and root vegetables. The low carbon footprint, the lower economically intensive, you need less investments in tree crops. Breadfruit is also very pest resistant. It's very suitable to marginal farmland, and also it can accommodate saline soils, such as coastal environments. That is one thing that surprised me, but in talking with a professor from Fiji National University, he described to me that some of the most prized breadfruit come from coastal areas because they believe that the slightly saline soils make the breadfruit more delicious. So that has incredible potential for Taiwan. Just to go into a little bit more of why I think this is important for Taiwan's context, there has been a great deal of research in Taiwan about climate change's effect on Taiwan's agriculture. And currently, Taiwan's agriculture is very much based on imports for the most important staple crops, things like rice, wheat, the building blocks for pasta, noodles, breads, those sort of staple crops that are most commonly consumed in Taiwan. And although I don't believe breadfruit can replace any of those, I believe that for the future of Taiwan's sustainability, food sovereignty, and for the economic mobility of Taiwan's indigenous communities to improve their economic status, and also to highlight and uplift them culturally within Taiwanese society, Breadfruit could play a very, very meaningful role. Going back to the sustainability issues of agriculture and climate change, over the next century, it is one research study suggests that it is likely that rice yields are going to decrease dramatically over the next century. And with that decrease in rice yields comes an increasing reliance on imports. And food imports are a significant issue in terms of food sovereignty and national sovereignty, because whoever controls your food controls your country, right? And I believe very much that Breadfruit could help Taiwan as sort of a color in Taiwan's agricultural palette to help supplement their agricultural ecosystem so that Taiwan has yet another tool in its toolbox to help them be more sustainable agriculturally and also to enhance Taiwan's food sovereignty. So, in the next section of this video, I will talk more about the actual eating quality and preparation methods of breadfruit. Okay, and now we can begin part 2. So I've prepared the breadfruit that you saw before in 2 simple different ways. The first is simply steamed so that I can describe the clean, pure, cooked flavor of it with no significant adulterations. And the other is fried, because fried is one of the most popular ways that it's served. One of the key characteristics of breadfruit is that it grows as an inflorescence. So the fruit itself is actually a cluster of thousands of tiny individual flowers. And that's what causes these striations, these lines, right? Because that is the path of where individual flowers had grown out to be pollinated. And as they grow and they develop starch, they maintain those striations. And with those striations, there are also tiny not microscopic, but very small pores. You can see those very small pores that develop. And those pores allow it to become very crisp, very crunchy when it's fried. It also allows openings for sauces. So that's one of the reasons why this is a really beloved food in all the countries where it's grown, because it has so much culinary potential. The most common ways that it's prepared are to be boiled or steamed, to be fried. It can also be used in its ripe form. When it's fully ripe, then it becomes very soft, almost pudding-like, and then it can be used in a similar way to bread dough. That's another reason why it's called breadfruit, is when it's fully ripened, the flesh gets quite soft, like bread dough. And when cooked, it develops a texture that's a bit like a dense brownie, sort of this dense, fudgy, moist texture. And it can also be used if it's beaten, if it's mashed, it develops a texture similar to mochi, to waji, when it is fried. Or not when it's fried, I'm sorry, when it is steamed. So now, to describe the flavor a little bit. Okay, so first I will start with a piece of the steamed breadfruit. And if you see when I break it, it's very, very tender, right? It's not fibrous at all, despite having those striations. Originally, I was worried that it would be fibrous because the Taiwanese A. trichulianus is very fibrous. But that's one of the characteristics that has been selectively bred out of it over the centuries. The texture of it is very, very similar to taro or to a potato or sweet potato. There's no sense of it being fibrous at all. It's very creamy, very smooth. I'll put in the space here a breakdown of its nutritional profile. Breadfruit is incredibly nutritious. It's far nutritionally superior to rice, and it's also nutritionally superior to potatoes. Nutritionally, it's very similar to sweet potatoes or taro, and it's also a low GI carbohydrate. It's also gluten-free, and what was the last thing I wanted to say? Low GI, gluten-free, and it's much higher in dietary fiber than many other carbohydrates. The dietary fiber content is similar to brown rice, sometimes even higher than brown rice. So it aligns very much with many food health trends, but it is still delicious. It's not a food where someone would feel like they're sacrificing flavor for nutrition. In this food, you can get both nutrition and flavor. Okay, I'll just give it another taste in its steamed form to describe the flavor. If you think of taro, in Chinese 芋头, if you think of 芋头, taro has this creamy tuber sort of root vegetable texture, but the flavor of it is distinct. It has this subtle, distinct aroma to it, right? And that's one of the reasons why it's much loved, is that distinctive taro scent, that wei dao, right? Breadfruit is very similar to that because it has that, it does not have any kind of strong flavor. It's very much a culinary canvas. I think its intrinsic flavor would easily be overpowered by sauces or other ingredients. But its own flavor is there, and it's very subtle the way the way taro's flavor is subtle. And it's quite hard to describe what that flavor is. It's in the same family as tropical fruits like the kwai mok or jackfruit, but it does not have that kind of strong scent, not at all. There is something distinctly somewhat tropical, somewhat fruity, a little bit like a plantain or like a banana, a little bit, but it's not that strong, not that sweet. It still has that culinary neutrality, right? I don't think it is distinctly sweet or distinctly for salty foods. I think it could really go either way, which would be very appropriate for Taiwanese foods, such as the sweet potato balls, the di gua chou. I think there could very much be mianbao shu chou, right? Breadfruit balls, or in use in foods like douhua, right? Foods like douhua that would often have sweet potato or taro. I think breadfruit would work beautifully in those foods, and so many other culinary uses. It's also used to make chips, like potato chips. It can also be dried, and once dried, it can be ground down into a flour. That is a very popular product coming out of Hawaii and in the Caribbean, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Tobago. In those regions of the world, they're already marketing a variety of products made from breadfruit. I'll try to put up a picture of some of those over here. Okay, now we can move into the fried. The fried, I have simply added salt, the way one would for potato chips. And this is truly my first time trying it fried, so. Did you hear that crunch? Wow. Wow. When fried, that distinct breadfruit flavor mellows, and it's almost unnoticeable. It really does. It really is very similar to a French fry, or to a, it's very much like a French fry, but I would say a bit denser. The way taro is more dense than potato, this is a sort of in between. It's a bit more like a dense French fry. The outside has become more crisp and a bit more firm through the frying, but the center is still very creamy and smooth. It has a really wonderful flavor. Let me describe this. You can see this central portion around where the core is, where it has those deeper pores. That area becomes very, very, you can hear the crisping, right? You can hear how crunchy it is. I don't know if you could hear that, but that was a very significant crunch. Wow. I understand why they love this so much wherever they grow it. It's really, really delicious. Before I came to Fiji, I had never seen or tried this fruit before, but as someone who wants to work as a sustainability researcher, I knew that sort of the holy grail of crops would be a high-yielding tree crop that produces a food that is a staple. Under the FAO, the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, the most vital crops are called Annex 1 crops, the crops that are most vital to human survival. Things like rice, wheat, potatoes, and breadfruit is an Annex 1 crop because it has that same broad nutritional profile that's vital to our survival as those other critical crops, but it grows on a tree, which makes it far more sustainable. And other qualities of this as an agricultural crop, I feel, make it a very easy sell. But I recognize that for people in Taiwan, this is very new. So I hope that this video will help you feel a bit more comfortable with the idea of breadfruit and the potential it has to support Taiwan's future, both the sustainable agriculture side to support the food system, but also the fact that this food falls off of the tree in this state. There's very little processing needed. Unlike rice or wheat that needs machinery to be processed before selling, this simply needs to be peeled. And there is the entire fruit is fundamentally edible. You can remove the core, which does not necessarily have to be removed, but is often removed. And most varieties are seedless. So it's a really, really practical and I think profoundly important food for the future. So I hope that this video has helped you learn a little bit more about breadfruit and has helped soothe some of the fears or anxieties you may have had about it. I think it is an incredibly valuable food that we all around the world need to take seriously, but I think that Taiwan should especially take a deeper look at. So thank you for your time. Bye-bye.